The accident that changed everything. The ball was at his feet. 23 years old, Real Madrid's goalkeeper, future blazing ahead like stadium lights on a summer night. Then came the crash, metal twisting, glass shattering, and in one violent second, everything Julio Iglesias had built collapsed into darkness. But nobody knew what would rise from those hospital sheets. September the 22nd, 1963. The Bentley skidded off a rain-slicked road outside Madrid. When they pulled him from the wreckage, his legs were motionless. Spinal cord injury. The doctors gathered around his bed with grave faces, whispering words that felt like death sentences. Partial paralysis. You may never walk again. Football? Forget it. For 18 months, he lay there. A young man who had sprinted across fields now couldn't feel his own feet. The hospital room became his prison, white walls, antiseptic smell, the constant beeping of machines measuring a life reduced to heartbeats. Visitors came with pity in their eyes. Teammates moved on without him. The world kept spinning while he remained frozen in time, trapped in a body that had betrayed him. The nights were the worst. When the hospital fell silent and the nurses dimmed the lights, Julio stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was all that remained. His father, a prominent gynecologist, had always pushed him toward respectability, law, medicine, something dignified. Football had been Julio's rebellion, his passion, his identity. Now even that was gone, but in that stillness, something unexpected happened. A nurse brought him a guitar. Her name was Erika. She'd seen too many young men lose hope in these sterile rooms. Try this, she said, placing the instrument across his lap. Your legs may not work, but your hands do. It wasn't encouragement. It wasn't therapy. It was simply something to fill the void between dawn and dusk, between one painful day and the next. His fingers, clumsy at first, found the strings. The first sounds were terrible, discordant, amateur, embarrassing. But unlike his legs, his hands responded. They learned. They remembered. Notes emerged, hesitant and broken, like his body trying to heal itself one cell at a time. Yet unlike his legs, his voice responded too. It grew stronger. Deeper. It carried emotions he couldn't walk away from anymore. Hour after hour, day after day, while doctors worked on his spine with needles and exercises, Julio worked on melodies. The pain became lyrics. The loneliness became rhythm. Every chord was a step his legs couldn't take. Every song was a goal he'd never score. Music wasn't his backup plan, it was his resurrection, his rebellion against fate itself. Physical therapy was agony. Learning to walk again meant relearning everything: balance, strength, the simple act of standing without collapsing. Nurses held him upright while his legs trembled and failed. Sweat poured down his face. Sometimes he screamed. Sometimes he wept. But between sessions, he returned to the guitar, and there, at least, he was building something instead of just surviving. The other patients noticed. His room became different from the others. Sounds of music drifted through the corridors, a strange contrast to the usual moans and medical machinery. Some found it annoying. Others found it hopeful. Julio didn't care either way. He was playing for himself, for the man he used to be, for the man he might still become. Months passed. His legs began responding, slowly, painfully, but responding. He could wiggle his toes. Then flex his ankles. Then, finally, stand for a few seconds before collapsing. The doctors called it a miracle. Julio called it stubbornness. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. The guitar had given him a reason to fight beyond just walking again. When he finally left the hospital in 1965, he wasn't the same man who entered. The goalkeeper was gone. The athlete who dreamed of championships and glory had died in that crash. In his place stood someone who would conquer stages instead of stadiums, who would score with melodies instead of penalties, who understood that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly meant to be. He enrolled in law school at Cambridge to please his father. Sat through lectures on contracts and torts while his guitar waited in his dormitory. Studied legal precedents while melodies formed in his head. His father smiled, believing his son had finally found the right path. But Julio's heart was already elsewhere, already singing. His first album dropped like a confession. La vida sigue, life goes on. The irony wasn't lost on him. His life hadn't just gone on, it had completely transformed, had been torn apart and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. The song became a hit across Spain, its melancholic melody resonating with people who'd never spent a day in a hospital bed but understood loss in their own ways. But here's what most never understood: Julio Iglesias didn't succeed despite the accident. He succeeded because of it. The crash didn't just break his body, it shattered the limitations of who he thought he could be. In that hospital bed, stripped of everything he defined himself by, he discovered the one thing that couldn't be paralyzed: his soul's voice. The 1970s arrived, and with them, an unstoppable rise. His voice, smooth, romantic, tinged with the pain of someone who'd stared at white ceilings for 18 months, captivated audiences. Spain first, then Latin America, then Europe, then the world. He sang in Spanish, English, French, Italian, Portuguese, German. 14 languages eventually. Each one a new conquest, a new field to dominate. Critics dismissed him as a crooner, a pretty face, a lightweight. They didn't understand that every note carried the weight of those hospital nights. Every love song was sung by someone who'd lost his first love, football, and had to learn to love again. Every performance was by a man who'd been told he'd never stand, now standing before thousands. By the 1980s, Julio Iglesias was everywhere. Performing for presidents and royalty. Selling millions of albums. His face on magazine covers, his voice on every radio station from Madrid to Manila. The man who couldn't walk became the man who traveled further than any athlete ever could, into 3 billion hearts worldwide, across every continent, every culture, every language barrier. He became known for his romantic conquests too, thousands of women, he'd later claim. The Playboy image. But perhaps that was another form of proving he was alive, that the paralyzed young man in the hospital bed had truly escaped, had truly reclaimed not just his legs but his entire existence. His relationship with his children, especially his son Enrique, would become complicated. The price of fame, of constant touring, of being everywhere except home. Enrique would follow his father into music, would become even more successful in some ways, and the two would share a complex dance of pride and distance, love and competition. But none of that diminishes what happened in that hospital room in 1963. A nurse handed a broken man a guitar, and he handed the world back a voice it didn't know it needed. The accident that should have ended everything became the beginning of everything. Today, when people hear Julio Iglesias, they think of romance, of Latin charm, of timeless ballads. Few remember the Goalkeeper. Fewer still remember the crash, the paralysis, the 18 months of darkness. But it's all there, woven into every song, every note, every word he's ever sung. The accident didn't just change Julio Iglesias. It revealed him. Stripped away the athlete to expose the artist. Broke the body to free the soul. Ended one dream so another could begin. And sometimes, late at night, when the concerts are over and the crowds have gone home, perhaps Julio still thinks about that rainy road outside Madrid. The moment everything shattered. The moment everything began. The ball was at his feet. Then it wasn't. Then the whole world was.